Right. And with those 30 seconds left, I will welcome everybody back and introduce our next session, Overlay Services, 3PPI Enablement by Lewis Daly. Take it away, Lewis.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Like I said, you'll be hearing from me today. So my name is Lewis. I haven't introduced myself. I'm working for Crosslake across a bunch of different things in the Mojaloop community, one of which has been the 3PPI workstream. And the first question that I'm sure you're all wondering is, where is JJ? And maybe I don't know how hairy his legs are. This isn't an actual photo of him, but he's on leave at the moment, paternity leave. So he's probably actually not relaxing on a beach. He's probably stressed out of his mind, taking care of a child. But nonetheless, I'm going solo today, but I may call on my various co-conspirators at one point or another. So we wish him well. So here was our PI 15 goals. Deliver V1 of the 3PPI integrated into upstream Mojaloop. And we broke this down into 3 different epics. And then we had a couple other kind of stretch goals, and our success, we called success. This stuff should be ready enough that we could, with a bit of hand-holding, support a hackathon using the third-party API. And so how do we do on our goal? Well, I'd say pretty good. We got there on the implementation side. We're in the final review stages of the API specification, and there's a pull request that we'll be talking about in a sec. And we've got everything. We've got everything but the tests, which is a lot. But everything, we have everything that is deployable and it will be deployed in the next Mojaloop version. We just can't prove that it works, but we're working on that at the moment. We've got that in our testing harness. We're just translating it across to the testing toolkit cases and making sure that we've got a nice, pretty guide that's easy to follow. So I'd say we did a pretty good job this PI. And in terms of just breaking that down to what the progress was in issues, we had 14 issues closed, and we have this third-party API v1.0 pull request, which is currently in review, and that includes our API definition. It includes the Swagger or Open API specification documents, and also includes all of our plant UML diagrams and transaction patterns documents that walks through how the account linking and how the transfers works. I'm realizing now I haven't given context to what 3PPI is. My mistake. We've talked about this a lot, so I forget sometimes. But really, what 3PPI is about inviting a new type of participant to join Mojaloop, one that doesn't hold funds on behalf of users, but one that a user can assign control of their accounts to, and can unify or initiate transfers, in our first iteration, peer-to-peer transfers from their various accounts from using a PISP or a 3PPI. And this is the best analogy is UPI in India, but also open banking in the UK has some pretty similar kind of frameworks for doing this sort of stuff. And GPay is the exemplar of doing this well, especially in India. I know in South Africa as well. If you still have questions, come and talk to me, because I know most people here are pretty familiar with this, but yeah, we can talk about it. So hackathon user demo, this was our key criterion for success was, is this stuff ready enough, it's PISP ready enough that someone can come along and build a demo using the tooling that we have, using the guides that we have, and where might they get stuck? Those are the kind of questions that we want to ask before we take this to an actual implementer of Mojaloop. So this is kind of a user story. It's pretty bloated. This probably could be broken down into many, a bunch of different ones. But really, as a hackathon participant who's a fintech, I want a use case guide, a working sandbox, and an easy to integration guide. Or sorry, I apologize for my poor English. I have no excuse. easy to use, easy to follow integration guide, so that I can build out a compelling demo in a short time frame. This is about introducing people to 3PPI, the concepts, the API, and giving them the tools to get up and running in less than a day, in a few hours, hopefully. And so, are we ready? Is the PISP workstream ready to support hackathons? And I would say yes. And we've even got a couple hackathons that we did support, although they didn't really use these features as much. We know some of the teams looked through the guides, but didn't end up actually wanting to be a 3PPI or PISP. They more wanted to follow the Dfsp peer-to-peer transfers. Anyway, we're talking about that later. But really, what I want to show you now is a little demo of what we've got available, and that's we have linking and transfer guides at the Mojaloop Sandbox portal. We've got basic Dfsp simulators that support 3PPI with OTP-based logins. There's a lot of acronyms there, but essentially these are mock banks that you can link accounts with, and they let you log in using an SMS code. And finally, we have a test site that helps you generate FIDO credentials. And this was a gap that we realized when we were building out some of this stuff, both in writing end-to-end tests for these features. Was it's really hard to generate credentials and to do it in a way that's consistent. So we previously had a different demo called Pineapple Pay, which you might have seen. And you had to do like log statements and copy things out and reformat. So I made a site, that makes that really easy to do and really easy to generate these sorts of test credentials. And the key thing here is that with the types of authentication that we're using, that's fundamental to the 3PPI feature set, it has a very strong tie to a physical user. So you can't easily just generate fake test credentials. You actually need a user with an actual device, like an authenticator. This is a YubiKey, which I'm going to be using in my demo in a second. And well, there's other ways to kind of mock those things out. There's nothing like a proper end-to-end test with proper credentials that makes sure this stuff works, because it surfaces all sorts of issues that you didn't know about. Yeah, let's go to the demo. I also want to point you to a couple of resources that we have available that can help you learn more about this. So we have Mojaloop Sandbox. I'll be talking more about this later, so we don't need to go too much into detail, but we have use case guides. I think I've shared some of this before. The one that I'm looking at is an integration guide for 3PPI linking. And this is the process of establishing trust between the PISP, the Dfsp or FSP here, and the payer, and making sure everyone trusts one another. That the most important thing being that my account provider, my financial service provider, knows that I have signed up with the PISP and I do trust them, and I want to use their app to initiate payments on my behalf. Now, so this is the guide. This all works, and if it doesn't work, let me know and I'll fix it. But it does work and it's pretty well tested. But there's always things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to step through how to implement this, how to actually implement this guide. And what I want you to imagine in this case is that I'm over here. I'm a PISP coming to a hackathon. I've read some of the documentation. I know a little bit about how this stuff works, and I want to build a front-end web application where I can get control or get delegated consent of an account that a user holds. So the first thing we're going to do is log in with the FSP, and that's over here. This is my FSP called Bank One, and I've already signed in. I don't want to waste too much time in the demo, but basically this is an OTP-based sign-in flow. We're using my phone number, which is my phone sitting here. I'm actually going to unmute it so that we can hear the OTPs when they come in. So I've got an account and I've given it my own nickname called Everyday Spend. So that's kind of the first step. Next, we're gonna now go to the command line, and I'm going to be switching between this kind of demo walkthrough and the command line, and looking at how to step through this integration guide. So I do like that these are called technical sessions, so it's quite explicit. Hopefully the command line doesn't scare you too much, but really I'll just be walking through a few of the requests and the responses. So the important thing here is that we have, similar to the Mojloop SDK and some of the stuff that works with Payment Manager, we've built a layer of abstraction that makes integrating with PISP easy. And that means that we can execute the asynchronous Mojloop API calls, or third-party Mojloop API calls, using synchronous calls. And in the cloud somewhere in the sandbox is a state machine that is taking care of that translation for us. So the first call is we're looking up the list of banks or DFSPs that support linking. And that's in this array here, bank one. Okay, well, that's great because I've signed in with bank one already, and I have an account with bank one, but we just saw in the bank one simulator page. The next step is to list the accounts that I hold with bank one. So here I'm putting in my account identifier, which is my phone number. And let's have a look at that. So we have one account here. It's called Everyday Spend, like I just showed you, and we can change that, and that updates dynamically. It's got a currency. It's in Philippine pesos, and it's got a unique ID, and we're going to use that ID in subsequent requests to do the account linking. So at this point, we're going to generate a consent request ID. So this is something that we have to make up. It follows a familiar format, and then or a predefined format. And then what we're going to do is we're going to send a request. I'll just kind of highlight it here. It's a bit easier to see, to bank one to say, I want to link my Everyday Spend account from this user, and these are the actions that I want to be able to execute on that account. So we can send that off. And coming back here is the response from the DFSP to say, okay, sure, we can do that. You need to log in using OTP. And then what you hopefully just heard on my phone was the SMS that bank one just sent me saying use OTP 579. I don't know. So here's a full OTP simulator. So here we're gonna log in with bank one using this OTP code. So I would put in the wrong one to show you what happens, but I don't want to waste too much time. 29724, hopefully that's right. 579724. Okay, so at that point, bank one now knows that that it is me, the PISP's user, who wants to complete the transaction, because we've done an out-of-band authentication using my phone that I have registered with bank one. Now, at this point, we need to create a credential, and that credential we can create using our test site that I just talked about. Now, you could implement this yourself, and indeed you will want to implement it yourself, but our test site, which I have here, pre-PPI demo, makes it easy for us to generate these credentials and do it consistently. So first of all, you can generate a credential, and after you've generated that credential, you can then use it to verify a transaction. So we can create a test credential. The credential cryptographically signs a challenge, which is generated from the consent object that got sent to us from the DFSP. So this is unique. This is going to be newly generated for each time. So we can't just create random credentials, or someone can't maybe hack into a PISP and maybe look up a bunch of credentials and then at a later date get access to an account by attaching that credential to a consent object. It must be derived the challenge here must be derived from that consent object, which is only created and is only valid, I think in this case, for 30 minutes. And that's all configurable. So we've got that, we've generated a challenge, okay. And at this point, we can register the credential. I'm going to use I think this screen doesn't always show up, but on my Chrome browser, I'm clicking USB. I'm going to verify with the USB security key. And then I'm going to tap the physical device and hit allow. And then we can see registration succeeded. And we have this key ID, which as a PISP, I need to store so that I can then approve future transactions. I'm not going to go through that today because we're already running out of time. But hopefully what you'll get an idea of is just how easy it is to use this environment to create test credentials and get a feeling for the whole experience end to end. So this is me now attaching the credential. So I have this consent object that a Dfsp has created. Now I'm going to attach a credential, which is tied to a user's authenticator. Could be like a YubiKey, could be like a fingerprint or a Face ID unlock, something like that. And then going to send that through to the Dfsp. Hopefully I haven't messed everything up. We'll see. And there we go. You can see here credential status is verified and the current state is accounts linked. So now what I have is this trust between those three parties, and I have a credential that lives on my my device that I can then use to verify transactions or sign transactions. And behind the scenes, there's a lot of kind of magic that went on inside of Mojloop, which included sending this credential to an authorization service, which verified that everything checked out okay, and then it stores that as the authoritative source of this consent object. So that is a pretty kind of rushed look at the hackathon support that we have at the Mojloop sandbox, and hopefully gives you a feel for how close we are and how ready this is for people to get up and running. So all of that stuff, this demo, I mean, I know I wrote the demo, but it didn't take me long to implement, and yeah, what we've seen is other people have been able to read through this and get a good understanding and start to kind of play around with it. So back to our goal. We said our goal was we want to support a hackathon, and this is where I drop a bit of clickbait to say you won't believe what weird things these teams came up with. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later on. We had two hackathon events, the MAS CDBC hackathon, and then and more recently the High People Women in FinTech. Unfortunately, we didn't actually really get many users on the PISP side of things, but we still learned a whole bunch that we can about people integrating with the sandbox that we can then apply as a bit of a spoiler. So I've got maybe a minute and a half left. I think just to kind of talk about next steps here. This is a rough look at what our goals are for the next PI, and we're not going to be having a breakout session tomorrow, but there's going to be a meeting next week that I'm scheduling. And really, I think our overarching goal should be to get this ready for production. And what we want to see is an existing or a new implementer can come along, look at our documentation, look at what assets and our artifacts that we have in our Helm charts, and be able to deploy it with some handholding. I think there's a caveat to say this isn't all. There might be scheme-specific things they want to do, or there might be other, hurdles and learnings that we have throughout the integration project or process. But we would really love to see that happen in this next PI. So please help us plan. Yeah, like I said, there's no breakout session. This is when I've scheduled a meeting that I'm yet to invite people to, but it'll also be on TeamUp. So you can either just ask me here to invite you or go to the TeamUp page, mojloop.io/calendar, and you'll see it there shortly. Lastly, just to thank all of our contributors to this work. We've been going at it for a long time, and it's really cool to see kind of in some ways we went off on our side, and now we're bringing things back into Mojaloop, and it's almost like we don't have to worry about this stuff anymore because it's all going to be there and it's all getting well tested, and it's great to put the grunt work of development, well, that is the fun part, behind us and work towards actually getting adoption and getting this running in real environments. Now, a little puzzle for you is, I know Sam likes to order his contributors list in alphabetical order, but this order is different. And if you can tell me what the order is of this list, you will get 10 Mojo bucks, which is a non-existent currency. Cool. That's all I've got, everyone. And I think I'm pretty much on time. I don't know, Simeon, if we've got time for any questions. Oh, and a coupon for Miller's Burgers. Yeah, if you can get that, I'll give you a coupon for Miller's Burgers.
I can speak from experience that Miller's Burgers are, it's a great place. I highly recommend it. And I don't receive any promotional consideration for this. So thanks a lot. This is really great, Lewis. I can't believe how far this thing has come along. I mean, I love that you put a link to the white paper in there, because this is really an indication of, well, you just write it down on paper and then eventually it comes true after hundreds of hours of work, and obviously a good showing by everybody who's been involved. This is really great. Thank you. There were a couple of questions along the way, and I don't know how much time we have for it, but I'll tee them up at least, and maybe there'll be an opportunity for that. So one in particular was, it looked like as you began the demo that there was a request to the Mojaloop system for a list of participants. Did I understand that correctly? So that could be problematic in some environments if we are super successful. I think about, for instance, in Tanzania or another national level system where you could have hundreds of providers that are connected to the system. And it would seem to me that the specific workflow that you go through, where a user says to a Google Pay or a system like that, I would like to use your system. And that system needs to ask appropriate questions of their end user and then submit the appropriate questions to the Mojaloop system and tie the two things together. I don't think that you would want to go on a fishing expedition through that, though you could. So I want to be careful about how that fits together. And mostly right now, it's my own gap in understanding. I'm not saying that I've spotted something that I think is incorrect. I think I need to understand it better. So from my perspective, I guess the question is there a way to work through what the typical flows would be for different kinds of overlay services so we can get an understanding about how you'd put these pieces together and how realistic that would be in an environment where we are, say, outsizedly successful and we have, dozens of providers on that system?
Yeah, so you're talking specifically about looking up the list of DFSPs who support PISP?
Yeah, in the beginning, you had a curl request that said providers, and of course it came back with Bank One and nothing else. But I was imagining in my mind, it came back with, well, let me just put it this way. So in Tanzania in particular, sorry to keep harping on that one, but it's top of mind for me. So, there are 4,700 microfinance providers. And they could be available as participants through aggregation and other forms. We're talking years down the road here, but you can see that the scale of this, it starts off with, say, a few, then it goes into a few dozen, then it goes into a few hundred, and then it becomes more. And so the specific design for how you onboard to the system being user-driven limits that. I'm not going to have 4,700 providers as an individual. I'm going to have one of 4,700. So the question is more about how does that onboarding flow look? It's safe for the end user. So you're not asking them rude questions about who they bank with, but you still need to know that. And that's the kind of thing we're getting at. But of course, you also don't want to have the overlay provider have to make deals with 4,700 providers. So there's some intermediation that's required as well. Anyway, that's the nature of my question is how this scales out.
Yeah, so it's like, how do you
jump in, Lewis?
Appropriate. Yeah, sorry, maybe just to clarify quickly, Michael, is it's about getting the appropriate context from the user to understand what questions you need to ask. I'm also thinking of a case, I remember banking in the Philippines where there's two banks that have names that are almost identical. And I knew that if I put the wrong one in the field where I'm sending money to someone, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get the money back. So what if you have two MFIs that have almost the same name? How do you deal with that as well? I think is another consideration. But please, Michael, go ahead by all means.
So I was just going to add to what I think was the import of Miller's question, was that one of the design decisions we made early on in the thing was that we wouldn't insist that all participants in a modular loop scheme also provided access to 3 PPIs. And what this question is designed to elicit is which of the participants in the scheme can a 3 PPI attach to?
That's unusually unusually helpful. A system like this, actually.
We'll try not to be helpful. We'll try not to be helpful again. Miller.
I mean, you could have taken the cheese shop
oversight.
approach. The cheese shop approach works also in this case, which is you simply allow them to try to onboard with the provider of their choice and to be told that that's off today. That particular provider is not part of the system in the scheme. But you see, this is the thing where I think the overlay providers would know better. Now, you don't want them to have to make deals with everybody one by one, but they would certainly know who that list of providers was, not that and they're not going to do it on the fly necessarily. So in other words, a Google Wallet or something like that, they'll have to do some integration work themselves to think about how they present this massive list or short list or whatever. So I guess my point, Michael, is that I'm not saying you don't need this, you do, of course, but it may be used in a different way. The flow may be sort of more of a one-time or an infrequent survey by the wallet provider, right? Of who's around.
APIs, the recommendation we have in the API was once a day. You make this call once a day and then you cache it. But yeah, it's certainly up to flexibility, and you can also think about things that we hadn't considered, and I'm only considering more recently, is what if a Dfsp that supports these features wants to include their logo in a list that someone can browse, or like that? We don't have the ability to do that, or even a friendly name. We don't really have that. So I think there's certainly a bit more thinking we can do there, and that will come to light hopefully as we get more people involved.
I think you're right, and I think this is where it comes down to use case design, and we don't want to do too much of that in speculation. You obviously want to make sure the demo is compelling and shows the flexibility of the system, but then not try to put in too many detailed features ahead of market adoption, because then we're just doing work that is probably going to have to be reworked later or may not have a need by the market. So, but this is great. Thanks, Michael. I also appreciate your explanation here. I'd see if anybody else has a question here. I'll step aside. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Miller. Oh, and Michael wins the 10 Mojo bucks.
Hey.
Well done.
And I mean,
and
10 Mojo. Yeah, I was going to say 10 Mojo bucks, great. But what about the Miller's burger? That's the real. That's the one I really want.
We'll find a way of getting you that coupon, Michael. Lewis, thank you so much for your presentation and all the great work and updates.